the dog days of spring in multiple sports. Hey, everybody, Pick Six Podcast with Tom Shatel, Sam McKewon. I'm Evan Bland here on what is today? Wednesday. A lot to get to today. It's one of those tricky times of year when there's a lot going on and there maybe aren't a lot of games. We have some football recruiting to talk about, baseball, and their swoon in April. They're 3-6 at this point. Fred Hoiberg and company are active in the transfer portal with a couple of really interesting additions here in the last week. Is this the dog days of spring for you guys, or are you feeling, spry with everything going on?
Oh, I don't know. Because of the transfer portal, I feel like the dogs are always barking. I mean, there's every day you could wake up and a player could leave, a player could be coming. You can see a coach leave or coming. You can see an AD coming or going. It's just sometimes schools leave conferences without warning. That's just the world we live in. So, yeah, they're dog days for a football team trying to get better, but the portal never rests.
Yeah, I'm with Tom. Obviously the spring football stuff. It's come late in the cycle in the calendar, and so I think everybody's ready for spring football to wrap up, which it will next week. And yeah, I think this has been a quiet spring football, which is actually not the worst thing, right? Drama free, not a lot of stuff going on. The drama came early with Trev Alberts leaving and Troy Dannon coming in, so. Yeah, I mean there's still news going on, like Tom mentioned. You got the beer now at Haymarket on Friday, and then you got transfer portal and recruiting and all this other stuff. But spring football is kind of quiet. Like there's not a lot of drama attached to that.
So, and that's kind of where I wanted to maybe start is, I was at the open practice earlier this week, and you could just feel it. Like guys were grinding. A bunch of guys were out with the flu. Coaches were just hammering on players to do reps over again. Saw an equipment malfunction sort of play out in real time. So like you can tell this is the point where the novelty of the football is worn off. You're still more than a week away from the spring game. I'm curious, what was your guys' impression just of the fact that Tuesday was the big day for transfer portal opening, and you look around college football and you see, I think it was more than 150 FBS players go in. It was a quiet day for Nebraska. Like, what is that? How significant is that in your kind of view of what this program is becoming under Matt Rhule?
Oh, I guess it's significant, but it's probably not over yet. I mean, after the spring game, I mean, maybe guys are trying to figure out if how much they're gonna play or what their role is, or um, but yeah, they didn't lose that many people. If what one or two last December, and the word was, well, the culture is good. People want to stay and kind of ride it out. And okay, well, let's see what it's like in the spring. Well, so far, people are staying, so that's a good sign. But I mean, I don't think they're going to lose anybody of note, I guess, or any important players necessarily after the spring game. But we'll just have to see. But I think the players like what's going on, and they've been told it's going to get better. People are hungry to get better. They're waiting to see what does better mean. Everybody wants to go to a bowl game, so they want to stay and see how the movie ends.
I think they've got a split of really older guys and then guys that just haven't had, a full cycle or two yet. And so I think that's probably what you're looking at as far as guys not leaving too much yet. You've got gosh, I mean, maybe 50 redshirt freshmen, true sophomores, and true freshmen. And they're probably just not ready to leave yet. I mean, I don't mean that. That sounded wrong. There's going to be guys that are ready, that are they're just not ready to decide, yeah, I can't play here or I won't play here. I think the experience that they've had at Nebraska has been relatively good. I think there's a lot of, we like the position coaches. We like the support that we get in the university. Our academics are going pretty well. The head coach seems to care about me and what I think, which I think is probably true. I think Rhule's door is pretty open. And so I think you're going to get this cycle and maybe even one more where you're not going to get a ton of guys that are going to be like, listen, I'm making a business decision now and I'm going. I don't think people are ready to make the quote unquote business decision. There's going to be some guys for sure that are true freshmen or even redshirt freshmen that are third string or fourth string. But that doesn't mean go. I think the one thing that Matt Rhule's done, well, he's done many good things, but I think one of the things that Matt Rhule's done that's been good is he's been able to be very practical and honest with a lot of these players and say, listen, you've got a spot here. You can stay here. You can develop as a player. If you decide to make that move and go to the portal, no guarantees that you're going to find a spot that's better for you than the one that you've got now, especially when you're a young player. And so I think there's guys there that are going to stick it out for an extra year. Probably not, so we're going to see some portal departures after next season or after next spring. You're going to see a chunk at some point. I just don't think it's that moment. And then you got a bunch of 5th and 6th year guys and they're just finishing their careers, right? And so that group's going to be basically cycled out after this season. Your COVID year guys are going to go, and what you're going to be left with is, guys that got only 4 years left, and they're going to be making business decisions where they're going to be like, listen, I've been here for 2 springs now, and I'm still like 4th string on the depth chart. I love these guys, but I want to play football, and that's what I came to college to do, and they're going to leave, and they're going to leave on good terms. I think the good term guys are still a couple cycles away because I think most guys want to stick it out and see if they can compete right here.
I think the other piece too is the way that we measure rosters has changed in the last 2 or 3 years. Like it used to always be, how are they going to get down to the 85? What's that going to look like? And the line is so blurred now. I mean, you think back to signing day in December, Nebraska didn't even differentiate between walk-ons and scholarship players. And in some cases, I don't think we even really know which one guys fall under. And ultimately, does it really matter to the player if they're receiving a scholarship, quote unquote, or if it's an NIL package deal? So I think this assumption that Nebraska has to get down to numbers maybe is overblown a little bit. I think they have other ways that they can take care of guys financially, and so we'll see how that plays out. But I don't know. I don't see the exodus of players the way that maybe Nebraska had a couple years ago, just with the way things are going. So there have been a couple additions as well to the 25 class, and Sam, you've written about this plenty, about this idea that this is the time of the year now where Nebraska is really going to start loading up on that 2025 class. And we just got a couple additions recently that were announced: Jackson Carpenter of Lincoln Southwest, Bryson Hayes out of Maize, Kansas, which is right near Wichita. 2 very similar players, right? Both receivers, both verifiable track speed, blazing type of guys. I guess, Sam, you were able to, you spoke at least with Bryson, I think. What's your impression of those 2 additions? And is this the start of what? Of how big of a push for Nebraska recruiting in the next couple months?
They're somewhat similar players. I think Jackson Carpenter probably projects to a Alex Bullock type. When you look at I don't know how you would sort of look at his style of play. I would describe it as pretty dynamic. He can make some plays, up in the air, so to speak, in-air adjustments. I'm not going to say it's Brandon Riley. I think Riley was, although a walk-on, a little bit taller, and maybe a little bit different player. but similar in some ways to Bullock, maybe O'Reilly. Bryson Hayes could be, a lot of different things for Nebraska. He could play inside, he could play outside. I'm sure they'll try to see, is this a guy that can get open in tighter spaces? Because anytime you're inside the numbers, you're in tighter space and your agility matters more. It's not just straight line speed. I'm sure they're going to give him a chance. I think they feel good about where Jalen Lloyd's going to be at, for example, in year 2, because Lloyd is a guy that has shown in practice, based on what I've heard and what I've seen, that he can get open in those tighter spaces, kind of like a Wan'Dale Robinson did. We'll see if Bryson Hayes has that ability. If he doesn't, then they'll probably put him outside and kind of let him work and operate out there. He's a little shorter than Carpenter, but he's faster. Carpenter's got some nice track times. I don't know that he's ever going to consistently hit, 10.65. Maybe he will. But Hayes can kind of hit that pretty consistently. And so interesting players. Nebraska's been very, very comfortable using in-state scholarship offers. We heard Matt Rhule talk about it last week. I thought it was really interesting. I think you're going to see 3 to 5 more commits maybe by the end of April. So the spring game is on April 27th. Probably going to see a couple of guys commit from there. I think they're going to get their quarterback, TJ Lateef. I think is going to come to Nebraska. Don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but he is visiting for the spring game. I think they're going to get a couple of in-state guys on top of that. So I won't be surprised if they want to get this thing done. Like, they want to wrap up the majority of their class by the end of June. So, like, getting 17, 18 commits, you can always add later on once you kind of see some of the guys that cycle out, but they're probably destined for a smaller class. And not just because of scholarship numbers, but because they have a lot of younger guys in the program, and you can only develop so many guys at once. So I think it's going to be a smaller class. I think it's probably going to be in the high 20s, low 30s. It's not going to be a top 15 class. But I think Nebraska feels good about where they're at. And then they should. They've done a lot of groundwork to get this class done. And I think it's going to the dominoes are just going to kind of tip. And there's not, in my opinion, Evan, there's not going to be a ton of like feverish recruiting battles. One that you can watch is Michael Terry. He's from San Antonio. He's a 5-star. But I don't think there's going to be a ton of recruiting battles that are like drag out until the last day in early December. Terry might be one of those, but he might not too. So that now if Nebraska has a good season, if we're all of a sudden sitting here in mid-October and they're 7-0, well, then there's a whole new crop of players that might be interested in you. But if let's say they go 7-5, 8-4 next year, I think they're going to be real comfortable with the guys they're getting right now. So we'll see what happens.
Hey,
Yeah.
Evan, Sam, I just wanted to ask, the spring game has traditionally been a vehicle to show recruits, show off the campus and the crowd and all the stuff. Is that something that, I mean, can you have transfer portal guys come to the spring game? Can you show off to the portal? And I would ask you guys, are there needs for Nebraska right now in the portal, or were they are they out looking for maybe somebody or something?
Well, I mean, I think in theory, yeah. I mean, a transfer portal guy could visit. So like this is the 2-week window that opened this week. It closes the 30th. So that's just for guys to go into the portal. So right. So like Nebraska a couple of years ago added Marcus Washington in May as a receiver. So like it does happen. It can happen. So this is not necessarily the window where Nebraska has to lock these guys down, because that pool is still being created. But I don't get the sense that there are positions necessarily that they're after. I mean, the big topic that we've discussed has been, what will they do with quarterback? Will they get a veteran type guy to come be a safety net or a mentor, kind of a Casey Thompson or Chubba Purdy type, quite honestly? I don't know. I think based on what I've heard from Matt Rhule and what we've seen, I would be surprised at this point if they added a quarterback out of that room, and just kind of, going through the rest of the positions. Like, defensively, it seems like they're well stocked. Maybe running back is that spot if a game breaker were to go in for some reason, just because we haven't heard a lot of glowing praise necessarily at that position. Um, but I don't know. Like I'd be curious your thoughts, Sam. But I just don't see Nebraska being an active portal shopper here in the next month.
The Oregon State running back Martinez just went in, and Nebraska's not one of his visits. So I don't know if Nebraska pursued him heavily or not. I think they could definitely host a guy. I think the needs on the team are at this point extra quarterback. I think it'd be hard to add a running back because I think of what they've already told the room, which is we like the guys in the room. They've been saying that now for 2 years, and they already brought in a transfer. And you've got Ramir Johnson coming back, and you've got, Gabe Ervin in his fourth season. And so I think they'd probably keep that room intact. Doesn't mean that they couldn't find a guy. I don't know, I think a position that this will sound maybe a little under the radar. If they wanted to go out and get a second, like receiving tight end, I could see them saying, we need to add one more piece to this because we're not sure that Carter Nelson's going to like start day one or be ready to roll because he's coming in May. I think they're going to be really smart with Nelson. They're not going to try to throw him out there unless he's really, really ready. And I think, they'll determine that in August. But right now it's Thomas Fedoni and Nate Borkircher, and then Luke Lindenmeyer is your number 3. And then you got, Smith Flores, who's a red shirt, he's coming off of that. And then you got all these young guys. You got Carter Nelson, you get the kid from Papio coming in. You got Keelan Smith. You don't really know what that is because he's not here yet. And so I could see them adding something there, but I don't know if they need to. I think they like Nate Burkircher a lot for the things they ask him to do. And I know they really like Luke Lindenmeyer as a blocker. And so I think they'll be fine there. Defensively, we'll see. I mean, apparently they feel good about the corners. If they can move Malcolm Hartzog to safety, that means they think they got something in Bly Hill, opposite Tommy Hill, or they feel like they got something in Dwight Boodle, or Mario Buford, or whoever they've been working there. I don't think Evan Cooper would leave them short because he's been very aggressive in adding players. So they must feel good about that spot. But if they go out and get a corner in the summer, then that they felt like they needed a third corner, because I think the intention is Bly Hill will be the second corner. And then then Malcolm Hartzog's your third corner. But once he becomes a corner, then he's no longer a safety. And is Deshaun Singleton going to come back healthy? You can do that stuff all day long. Marquise Buford is back at safety. Gifford's back there, but he could also be a split safety, that third safety in the system. And so there's a bunch of different things that they could probably consider, but I think they probably feel pretty good about where they're at.
Well, let's talk a little basketball. It's been April Madness just as much as March Madness for Nebraska and a whole bunch of other college basketball programs out there. And this was a really active weeks for Nebraska. So after sort of enduring the attrition portion of portal life, Nebraska made some pretty interesting additions in the last few days. Raleigh Worcester, point guard from Utah, is a grad transfer, and then Gavin Griffith, a forward from Rutgers, who just finished his freshman season. And then Nebraska also officially announced they added Andrew Morgan, the center from North Dakota State. So 3 additions. They're not done yet. I guess, first of all, what were your impressions of the guys Nebraska brought in to try to continue the momentum from last year's team?
I think that they went and got a true point guard. So that's interesting to me. Raleigh Worcester has a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. I think it's probably 2.2 to 1. He does shoot quite a few threes. He doesn't make a lot of them. He's had 39 games where he didn't make one. But I think he's a point guard. Like, he scores 60% of his shots at the rim. He likes to get to the rim. He likes to distribute. He likes to drive and kick. And they didn't have that last year. They didn't have it. Jamarcus Lawrence didn't really deliver that, and Bryce Williams was a hey, let's all clear out and let Bryce drive to the rim kind of guard, but I don't know that I would describe that as a point guard. And prior to this year, Fred had a true point guard on every one of his teams: Cam Mack, Delano Banton, Alonzo Verge, although Banton liked to try to score too, Alonzo Verge, Sam Griesel, and then they had this most recent year where Jamarcus Lawrence didn't do it, and Aaron Eulis and whatever. And so I think now they've got a point guard, and I think that's probably something that Fred likes. Um, I understand the whole committee approach, but I think he probably wanted to add a guy that's going to play 30 games and start all 30 of them and play 30 minutes in those games and not have to worry about scoring. And so they got a point guard, and then this kid they just got, only the kid can make the shots, right? But if he makes shots, they got a really good player, and they know they did. This is basically for people who Jaskers who like to listen to the show for the football content. This kid's basically Jackson McAndrew, only a year older. He's a top 30 recruit. He picked Rutgers over Connecticut. I don't know why. I haven't delved into that, but same height, same size, same kind of player. Had some moments at Rutgers. Didn't make a lot of threes, but that's what he's supposed to be able to do. And if he's able to do that at Nebraska, he could be really, really good. Like he could be even next year, he could be a 12, 13 point a game scorer. And I'm sure that's what they were looking for.
Is Frankie Fiddler still on the radar? Or is who's sort of in the crosshairs at this point for Nebraska to continue to add? Maybe, and if not specific names, what's the need moving forward for Nebraska as it finishes out its roster?
What do you say, Tom? What's going on with Frankie?
Yeah, what is going on there, man? It seems like it just keeps getting delayed. The word I heard last week was it was down to Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Omaha. So that would take the two locals out of the running. I just I don't know where he would fit on the Creighton roster. I mean, I don't know. They're like you said, they've got the Minnesota kid coming in, Jason Green. They've got some other kids that set out this year. I don't know where he fits in Nebraska. I think is he a starter? So them bringing those guys in this week kind of tells me they're kind of moving on without him. Maybe if he was going to Wisconsin, wouldn't he already be there? Wouldn't he have already said yes? Michigan State, same thing. I mean, is he waiting on them to decide on other guys in the portal? Are they waiting on him? I think the longer this goes, I mean, I think he might. This might come down if it's money. There's no contest. UNO can't match anything that Wisconsin or anybody else could do. But if it's playing time, if it's I'm going to have the ball in my hands more at UNO than I would at Wisconsin or Michigan State, then this could get interesting. So there's a lot going on right now. What I have heard is that Frankie is still spending a lot of time at UNO. He hangs around the basketball office and every day, and he's still shooting baskets in the gym. So you never know. I mean, I honestly, it's just going to come down to, I think playing time and what his role is going to be. I just don't know if he's a starter in the Big Ten or not. It would just depend.
I think that's pretty interesting. Yeah, Evan, I think that one of the questions that's still sort of lingering out there, and is Rink Mast. Is Rink Mast coming back? And like is he returning to the program? Because we don't have an answer on that. I think you know, there's obviously pro opportunities to explore overseas, but is this an injury related situation? He only's got 1 year. You know, I think you'd be hard pressed to see them desire to have him go through surgery situations and then sort of have one of these, and then we will see what you can do in your 7th year after you. Maybe, I mean, but that doesn't affect this team coming up. So, you know, I think there's probably that discussion to have, but I would say that it appears that, you know, he's moving toward something, because they went out and still looked at some larger guys, you know, some posts, right? So one of the guys that's still in the mix, I mean, nobody said anything, is William Kyle, who would be a really interesting player. Obviously, the Bellevue West grad. He's got some opportunities in other places, but he hasn't made a decision yet. So I think he's one to watch. He's about 6'8", more of a defender, certainly, than Griffiths, who is also 6'8", 6'9". Griffiths is a scorer. He needs to score. He's 6'8", 193, so he's lean, and he's a 3. He's like Mason Miller at Creighton, only they think he can be better, obviously. And then you have Igor Milicic, the center from Charlotte, who the former teammate of Bryce Williams. And Igor would basically be a guy for guy replacement of Rink Mast. So he's already had a visit. If you look at his numbers from Charlotte, he shot 38% from 3 this year, 56 for 149. So he was their number 1 3-point shooter. He's 6'10", 255, 38% from 3, 82% from the free throw line, average 12.8 points and 8.5 rebounds. And not bad, a block a game, which isn't half bad, actually, in college basketball. The really elite players average 2. So that he would be a guy for guy, like, replacement. So his presence in this deal indicates to me that they're not sure Rick Mast is coming back. Right? Like, there's that. And then the other guy they were going to host was Hughley, who was at Pittsburgh last year, at Oklahoma this year, and he gets hurt a lot. Well, he's going to Xavier. He committed to Xavier yesterday. So maybe they got their guy in Igor Milicic. And if he comes in, then you have him, and you got Andrew Norman, who committed from North Dakota State. And then you got a real deal point guard who was at a power conference school last year. And then you got a high ceiling wing in this kid from Rutgers. So I think they needed a good point guard. I really did. This whole, like, well, we're just going to rely on the guy that didn't play last year because he was suspended, and he'll be great. Didn't seem to wash for me, especially since, like, before we hired Wilson, I was covering the team, and that guy is not a shooter at all, and he's got kind of an odd shot, to be honest with you. And I think Raleigh Worcester, even though he isn't a very good shooter, is a more offensively minded player than Aaron Eulis. Eulis, I think, is there to be a Big Ten. I know the league, and to be a defender. I don't know that the presumption that he was going to come in and, like, be this elite point guard who scored a bunch, I just didn't track with what he did at Iowa. So Worcester's addition helps them. I don't know. We'll see what they got. It doesn't appear to be. So somebody put on the message board, one of the message boards, and I think this is probably fair. This doesn't appear to be a team that he's putting together that could necessarily have a better chance of beating Texas A&M. But it could be a team that is, the goal is to make the NCAA tournament. You can't worry about who you're going to play once you get there. And it does look like a team that reminds you an awful lot of Wisconsin or Northwestern. And those teams have won NCAA tournament games, as last I checked, at times. Not this year. Well, Northwestern did, but, like, you can't worry about which matchup you get in the NCAA tournament. But these what Nebraska's putting together feels a lot like Wisconsin Northwestern. That's why. But maybe I'm wrong.
Hey, one more basketball developing story. Tom, what can you tell us about the Nebraska Creighton game and how it may conflict with another prominent event on the calendar in November?
Yeah, well, appears that um, the Nebraska Creighton game next year will be on Saturday, November 23rd, and which is the same Saturday as a certain football game in Lincoln, Nebraska, Wisconsin, uh, senior day. And so I don't think that's ever happened, at least not in many, many years where uh, a marquee non-conference basketball game was so early that it was the same day as a football home game. So well, I guess we will declare it a J-Sker holiday, and wear the appropriate garb for that day. Get your red and then throw the blue in the car, and dash off if you must. Now we aren't going to know what time the football game is, probably until the Monday before. So I don't know what TV network decided that was a good idea, but there'd be some fans that probably can't that would do both, but probably can't do both. So, going to be interesting. And then that's right about the time where Nebraska, if they somehow win 5 games or get around 6, could break over into the bowl. Break the barrier, the land, the land of the lost. The land time forgot. Bowl seat, bowl eligibility. If that happens, we won't know how to react, but it'll be a big deal. I promise you. And so the Wisconsin game is always the big deal. And this is the last time they play for a couple of years, I believe. So, any case, all kind of fun things happening there. Why that game was that day? There's probably a reason. Maybe it's scheduling. It's usually early December, and it's been on a Sunday recently. So we'll see. But and I guess I suppose that I'm told that that contract has been signed, but doesn't mean it can't be moved. But if that's where they have it, that's where they want it. So I gonna guess Fred Hoiberg doesn't have recruits that's signing days already taken care of. He's not worried about having recruits at the football game necessarily. So yeah, so we'll get the World-Herald helicopter. It'll park on top of the press box at Memorial Stadium. I will jump in and try to go to Omaha if the helicopter is not available. Well, I'll have to take train or bus, or I don't know if I get my car out of the parking lot. But we will we'll try to do both. We'll see.
I don't know what TV network the game will be on. I mean,
I mean, yeah, they're on football, right?
yeah.
I mean, that's the Saturday before Thanksgiving. There's a few rivalry games on.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know who's going to make space for that. I don't. The game is controlled by the Big East because it's a Creighton home game. So it's Fox or CBS or FS1. I don't know.
Probably FS1. They don't do a lot of football, do they? I guess they do some, but I don't know.
They do a little, but yeah, I don't know. I'm sure they'll figure it out if it turns out to be that day, if that's when they decide to play the game. I know that I should know this. I don't know what Nebraska's basketball's holiday tournament thing is next year. I feel like there is one, but I can't remember what it is. I feel like maybe they're in Hawaii, but I know Creighton's in the Bahamas, and that's the following week. And so maybe Creighton wants to create a situation where they have enough time between the rivalry game and getting there to the Bahamas to play those games. It's hard to say. I do feel like Nebraska basketball does have something that's more robust than the thing they did this year, which wasn't much at all. one of the things that I do feel like Nebraska's got to continue to do is just make sure it schedules its non-conference in a way that like you face enough different kinds of teams that when you get to the NCAA tournament, and this was true of Gonzaga, it was true of Alabama. Alabama scheduled in a way that prepared them for the NCAA tournament. When they got to the NCAA tournament, they were pretty damn good because they played a lot of good teams, didn't beat a lot of them, but they had played a lot of really good teams. And to be honest with you, they're the only team that hung with Connecticut for, 75% of the game because they had played so many good teams up to that point, and they did most of that in November and December. So I think Nebraska, if it wants to get better in the NCAA tournament, has to schedule commensurately. You have to play different kinds of teams as opposed to assuming that the Big Ten is going to solely prepare you. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an intriguing football season for sure. One of those games is going to be on NBC at 9. I don't know what Nebraska home game that'll be. But one of them will. November 16th, they go to USC. And I don't know if people remember this, but Fox is going to do like a Friday night football thing this year, I think. They're going to have like a Friday night game of the week. Fox Maine. And man, that USC game looks awfully enticing for that. Out in LA.
Oh, that'd be unbelievable.
Yeah. So remember, folks also have to remember Nebraska has built into its Big Ten preferences a tolerance for one Friday night road game in Big Ten play. They've had one every single year, I think. They had one within 2022. It was out at Rutgers. My God. That was like nightclub night. And then last year, who they play on Friday night? Was it Illinois?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And then back in 21, I can't remember who the hell they played, but I think they played in 21 on a Friday night too, on the road. God bless it, I can't remember who it was that they played though. Maybe they didn't play anybody on Friday night in 21. But they have a tolerance for doing this. And so one of the games on the road. So the Purdue, Indiana, USC, and then I was already on Friday. So one of that Purdue, Indiana, or USC, one of those will be probably on Friday night.
That would be interesting.
I'd root for the USC one in that circumstance.
Yeah, why not? All right, Sam, you put out a few questions on Twitter or
Yeah.
X as well that we could tackle.
You can still call it Twitter, man. It's all right.
I do call it Twitter. X just sounds weird, like it's
Yeah,
Twitter.
I'm with you. Okay. The first question is relative to the thing that we just talked about. What is the best away game on the schedule for fans to travel to this year? And I think I just said what it was.
Yep, you did. It's not Indiana, it's not Purdue, Iowa.
In Ohio State, they play Ohio State.
Ohio State's good, but there's only one USC, and it's at a time in the fall where being on the West Coast is always good. So yeah, they last played there in 2006, and
Were you guys both there?
I was, and
I was not, no.
Okay.
yeah, it was a late night game, and Bill Callahan just that was a year after USC played in the national championship game against Texas. It didn't have Reggie Bush or Matt Leinart, but they had everybody else, and Nebraska just kind of crawled into a ball, and Bill Callahan said, "We're going to hand the ball off and get out of here, take our medicine, and move on." And
Not going to be blown out.
they ended up going to the Cotton Bowl that year, so they won the Big 12 North. This is why we did what we did, and it's so yeah, that was 06 would have been a Zach Taylor team.
Yep.
So yeah, so I mean this will be fun. This will be the new Big Ten. And I would assume big TV game.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on the record as saying Purdue is the most laborious trip because you can't fly there easily, you can't drive there easily, and then when you get there, it's West Lafayette, which is, it's fine. It's a college town, but yeah, that return trip to LA, it's going to be outstanding. Finding a hotel shouldn't be an issue in a town that size. Obviously, there's plenty to do. I think you can make a case for Columbus as well. And the Horseshoe is one of the cooler venues in
Great
college
stadium.
sports, and you get there and you never know. Like if Nebraska were able to pull an upset in a setting like that, like that's a memory that
Yeah.
you're never going to forget.
Yep.
So I think you can make a case for that too. There going to be a ton of talent on that Ohio State team. You can have a chance to say you saw however many future NFL players doing their thing against the Huskers.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
there
East
was
Coast.
a lot of speculation. Dylan Raiola with Ohio State, correct? And even USC. So yeah, maybe a couple storylines there.
For sure. We're going to talk about baseball, but we're going to talk about it in the context of one of these questions, if that makes sense, because there's several about baseball off the loss from last night. Okay, so the second question in the group is basically this. Could the running back room be what holds the offense back? And then he goes through the guys. Gabe Ervin and Ramir have been hurt. Dante Dowdell just transferred in. Quentin Ives is yet to play. Emmett Johnson was okay. Could that group be the group that holds Nebraska's offense back?
Well, I don't think it'll hold it. They have to be healthy, though. I mean, they had that position never seems to be healthy. I think if they're healthy, the offensive line should be better. A lot of times running backs are only as good as the line,
Right.
but the running backs can also make the line look good. I think that I don't think there's going to be a superstar All Big Ten back, but no, I think that it should help. But it also helps if the quarterback is also completing passes, and the defense they can't load up. They have to worry about that. And I think a short passing game might be like a running game. And I've been watching Ramir Johnson how many years now, and keep thinking, well, there is something special in there somewhere, and they have not yet brought it out, and he hasn't been healthy to bring it out, and haven't had the offense to bring it out. And I wonder, Rhule, I mentioned this earlier that we got to get him out there and get him the ball. So um, I don't think it'll hold anything back. I think it should be. I don't think it'd be a dominant running game, but I think it should be a running game that's a good complement and should be able to get first downs and hopefully red zone touchdowns.
I would just say, yeah, I think it could be the group that holds the offense back, if only because I think all the other groups are clearly trending upward. I mean, the offensive line has depth. It's one of the most veteran lines in the Big Ten. You like what you see, I think, at receiver. That seems like a group that's going to pop with some of the younger guys, as well as the transfer additions. Like you can just see playmaking ability and physique and all that. I think quarterback, the discussion there is more about what can you do to avoid sabotaging yourself through turnovers than it is needing them to make spectacular plays and to put the team on their back. So I think those positions are all trending up. And I just don't think we've heard a lot of glowing praise from the running back room. And maybe in part that's because that position is best evaluated when you're tackling to the ground and who can push through a tackle and stay on their feet and churn out those extra yards. So maybe it's some of that, but it feels very similar to what we've heard from with this room in the past, where you're waiting to hear this guy broke out or that guy's it's that guy's job to lose. And I think it's just been very general praise about the group so far. And then you factor in what Tom mentioned with the health and sort of some of the uncertainty there. And it just seems like that's the group certainly with the most to prove as this offense looks to take a step forward.
Okay. So here's the question about baseball. There's several. Um, One of them says, which is more overrated, baseball or softball at Nebraska? I mean, the softball team's best player got hurt, and she got hurt in a weird way the first game of the year. So I don't know what else to say about that. Then there's another question that says, is Will Bolton the hot seat if he misses another regional this year? Basically, you don't have to answer that question specifically, but what's going on with the Nebraska baseball team that, 3 weeks ago was headed toward potentially hosting a regional with LSU being the number 2 seed to now they're right on the bubble with a 3-6 record in April. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean the
Stop playing
bullpen.
Creighton.
Go play Creighton would help, no doubt. The bullpen's regressed for sure. I mean, they blew the multi-run lead at Rutgers a week ago in that Friday game. Obviously, they were up in the ninth against Creighton when it hits the grand slam on Tuesday. And they just haven't found a lot of continuity there. So, like, I think big picture, you see teams lose midweek games, you see teams go into slumps. Probably the concerning part would be just the inability to put it all together. Like even against Creighton the other night, like I felt like for the most part they had guys on the mound who pitched pretty well until they had one inning when they didn't. And so I think what Will Bolt was more frustrated about was the offensive side of things, to where they shouldn't have come to the point where 3 runs needed to hold up late in the game. I mean, the wind, I don't know if you guys watched the game, was howling out to left. And Creighton did a good job of just put the ball in the air, and the 2 home runs that Teddy Detters hit, that's all he did. He put the ball in the air, and the wind took them both out by like 2 feet over the wall. And Nebraska wasn't getting it up in the air. I mean, they were flaring it, they were grounding it. They didn't pull away and have that sort of killer instinct that the best teams have, where they turn a 3-1 lead into 5-1 or 6-1, and then you're not clinging and hoping in that ninth inning for things to turn around. So I think that's part of what it's been. The other thing I would say too is I think the Creighton struggles cloud the discussion, because if Creighton was a top 45 RPI team, I think if you replace the word Creighton with Wichita State or with Kansas State, then people would say, you know what? They lost to a pretty good team. It was frustrating, but it doesn't really hurt you. And ultimately, it doesn't really hurt Nebraska. They're still a top 20 RPI team, which has them safely as of right now in the postseason. So, they're very much in contention to win the Big Ten. Some of the midweek stuff hasn't been there. They clearly didn't handle being ranked very well. But, if you're still trending for a 2 or 3 seed and making a regional, like I still think that's progress. That's something Nebraska would take. And they have a couple of aces now in Brett Sears and Mason McConaughey, and I think that can make any series interesting.
So you think they're fine?
Yeah, I do. I think they're going to take a series from Maryland this weekend. I think it's a slump. I think the frustration in part comes from the start that they had. So like if your goal as a fan is like, man, I want to watch a regional game at Haymarket Park, you're probably going to be pretty upset, because I think they played their way out of that in the last couple of weeks. But if you're talking about making the postseason, clearly, making the Big Ten tournament without any issue, and having some guys that like in any given game can keep you competitive like they have in those ace pitchers, then I think you're in a good spot. And not to say that the wheels still couldn't fall off, but it feels like this team still has enough depth to figure some things out, to weather a slump. And again, like you're not talking about a team with like a 70 RPI where you're like, oh man, they need to go on a run. Like they have one of the top 30 toughest schedules in the country right now, and that's going to buy them a lot of leeway down the road.
They play Maryland, then they play Kansas, then they play Iowa next weekend. During the spring game. I get it. Whatever. That was a Trev idea, and that I don't really understand that one.
Maybe we could do a Nebraska Creighton basketball game next weekend.
We could. Get the Iowa football, and yeah, Iowa football fan. Like I was gonna say, for Creighton basketball fans that have now pledged to being an Iowa football fan, though, that would be the Jay Huckster. Um, Iowa plays at Maryland that day on November 23rd, so you don't have to worry about getting from Kinnick over to CH. No worries there. I mean, because the Creighton basketball fan has to pick a team, right? So it's either Nebraska, Iowa, or Notre Dame. Like there is no Creighton football. I really wish there were. I'd love to cover that. They want to bring it back. I'm all for it. But otherwise, they have to pick a team. Like they can. I guess if they don't want to pick Nebraska, they can. But then that means you're picking Iowa or Notre Dame, which are both fine franchises. So they play. What's interesting about their schedule is okay. So they have Maryland and Kansas and Iowa. So they have 8 straight home games coming up, or 7 straight home games. Then they go to Creighton again. Then they have Kansas State, then at Minnesota, South Dakota State, Indiana, and Michigan State to end the regular season. And from my eyes here, they don't play any of the teams that are at the top of the Big Ten on the way out here. Is that accurate, or is Iowa still better than their record?
Yeah, I mean, Iowa's shaky. Their pitching has really been shaky. Indiana can hit with the best of them. You don't really know. Illinois is the Big Ten leader at this point. I'll be curious to see if that holds up. I think the numbers would say maybe it won't. And Penn State has been decent on the weekends too. I think it's a really down year for Big Ten baseball. And I know it's never a great year for Big Ten baseball, but to me, it's a two-bid league. I think Nebraska is still in good position for an at-large, and maybe one other, depending on how the tournament plays out with the auto bid. So it's eminently winnable, in my opinion. And yeah, maybe Nebraska got a little break with some of the scheduling in terms of who they missed. Maybe.
All right. I think that's good.
All right. Well, we will be back next week. We'll get some spring game preview, a little bit more with the portal. Maybe we'll be talking about a Nebraska baseball bounce back. Who knows how it'll go. For Tom and Sam, I'm Evan. Thanks for listening, Husker fans. We'll talk to you later.